Thank you. We'll be very grateful for sharing our preliminary results of our investigations findings on such topic as heatwave mortality in Russia and 2010 heatwave in particular. As you all know, the climate is constantly changing, and such extreme weather events as heat wave droughts are getting more frequent and severe, and heat waves are among the most harmful for health. They contribute the most for mortality and morbidity. And while they're extensively studied in the developed countries, and many conclusions are pretty conventional, some patterns are quite controversial, both in the developed countries and the developing countries, and we'll just wanted to investigate such patterns in case of European Russia. While it is generally approved that the elderly population is much more vulnerable during the heat wave, it is still unclear what are the special patterns, whether the cities, northern or southern cities, are much more vulnerable to the heat wave, to excess temperatures. Such temporal effects as lagging, as harvesting, it's a compensatory drop of mortality after the heat wave. They are unclear. Some studies provide that they happen after the heat wave. Some disagree on such topic. And there are some other issues, such as, for example, urban-rural divides and socio-economic patterns of excess mortality attributed to high temperatures and heat. And we will also try to shed light on it because they are rarely considered, especially emphasizing on urban-rural divide because it was not often studied in depth. So what we tried to do is to estimate excess mortality during the heat wave in European Russia in 2010. It was the most pronounced and the most notorious heat wave in recent history, especially in Russia. It was still poorly studied. And so aside of just quantifying excess mortality, we also tried to investigate its geographical patterns, especially urban-rural divide, and to define the most vulnerable regions during the heat wave. And also tried to study some temporal factors such as mortality displacement. So as you can see, the scope of our study included the vast territory of European Russia. Heat wave was not really uniform at this territory, so we've included a really broad interval of our study. It was 6 weeks. And we also used data for 2005 from 2009 as a reference period for baseline mortality estimation. We've studied both the urban and rural population of all the regions, and we've studied large cities with more than 100 inhabitants in depth distinctively. So we've used Russian Statistical Service data, both mortality microdata and age sex compositions provided by statistical agency and derived from it by Center for Demographic Research in Russia. Key issue in excess mortality estimation is the baseline actual estimation, because the excess is just a difference between the observed mortality levels and the estimated, which were assessed basing on recent trends. So we've just implemented such model. As you can see, this formula on the screen. It included seasonal patterns, linear trends, spline pattern. So we've just decided this model is the most appropriate due to some statistical criterion. And we also assessed excess mortality in both relative and absolute terms. So we've assessed it in death counts by just number of people and in standardized mortality rate, age standardized. And we also built confidence intervals using bootstrap technique. So here are just brief results of our estimations. There were 57,000 excess deaths, but they were not distributed evenly in both spatial and hierarchical terms. As you can see, rural areas suffered less than large cities, especially Moscow, and regions with the largest urban agglomerations, the largest metropolitan areas were suffering the most, and the urban-rural divide was really pronounced, and rural areas didn't suffer as much as big cities. It is also similar patterns are also observable on the map. So you can see that urban areas suffered more, and just using some spatial clustering techniques, we've also revealed the cluster of highest mortality. So the greatest increase was concentrated in regions of central Black Earth and middle Volga regions, where the elevation in temperatures was the greatest, while the population of such regions as northern regions of European Russia and North Caucasus, they did not reveal this the excess mortality at all. In terms of city size, as you can see, excess mortality was much more pronounced in the largest cities, especially in cities with a population of over 500,000 people. And it is partially attributable to urban heat islands, which are more pronounced in larger cities, and also by low base effects, because the mortality has recently dropped in the largest cities, and it was decreasing much faster than in, for example, rural areas. And also we've revealed such excess mortality belt, also identifiable in both regions and for large cities as well. However, with the cities with less than, for example, with 100 or 200,000 inhabitants, their results were majorly indecisive due to not really large population size and very wide, broad confidence intervals. So in many parts, we could not just draw some plausible conclusions. As you can see, the mortality during such broad periods we've defined as a heatwave period, it was concentrated on 3 weeks. And this peak mortality was much more pronounced in cities with more than 500,000 people. And then after the highest temperatures observed on the week 31, it rapidly dropped. However, we could not observe no harvesting, no drop of mortality level below the estimated baseline. So we cannot just say that harvesting effect was really pronounced in cities of European Russia. There are some issues that what mentioning that limited our study, while, for example, the smallest cities among the largest ones draw really broad confidence intervals. We cannot draw really great conclusions on the cities, on such cities, due to very broad time frame. There are some issues in estimated excess mortality, and weekly estimations did not allow us to draw some conclusions on lagging effects and harvesting. So to sum up, larger cities suffered much greater losses during the heat wave. We've investigated and revealed urban-rural divide that was really studied previously. The greatest mortality increase was concentrated in the regions of Central Black Earth and Middle Volga. And the final conclusion is that the heat wave harvesting was not really defined in our study. Well, that's all. Thank you for your attention. I will be glad to answer your questions.